What's up, YouTube? Today I'm going to talk about speaking to the dead, and this is from an Islamic perspective. Now, like my last video, and like most things in life, not everything is explicitly stated in the Quran. You can reference hadiths, but ultimately hadiths, they're not necessarily authenticated. I mean, it's essentially someone saying, I heard the Prophet say this, or blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, I'm coming here to bring personal experience, not just from myself, but from other people. And again, if something explicitly said this isn't true, or it's fake, or it's wrong to do in the Quran, then I wouldn't promote something like this. So that's just a disclaimer. But essentially, I've had experience talking to the dead. And I have family who has as well, but I'll start off with my story. The first time this ever happened to me, happened about 3 times, was my friend in high school. He ended up killing himself when I was in college. And to get pretty graphic, he hung himself from his basketball court and basketball hoop. And I felt extremely guilty. There was a huge part of me that felt like for some reason I was responsible for that, or I could have done something to help the situation. And I remember one day I was thinking about him lying down on my couch, and I felt this cool wind go by me, and it stunned me. And it's funny because as I was about to start this video, I just kind of had some weird things happen. And usually whatever my theme of my video is, the things around me start to kind of, show that theme. I guess this is why it's a little bit gloomier, but that's off the subject. But anyway, so I felt this strong, shivery coolness go by me, and I turned and I froze. And I thought of my friend. And that night when I went to sleep, I had a dream where I walked into a cave, and and I was walking, and there was kind of blood on the ground, and I was walking through this cave, and I look up when I get to the end of the cave, and I see my friend, and he's just smiling. And we just hung out just like we'd hang out regular wise, and basically, he said like everything's all right, I'm okay, this and that. From that day forward, the guilt went away. Like all that guilt that I was hanging on, that I could have done something, that I could have been there for my friend, it just all went away, and I knew he was okay. Now, I have cousins who they had a father pass away when they were young. They haven't told a lot of people, but obviously, I am me, so people might feel a little bit more comfortable talking about some of the spiritual stuff, or some of the stupid people, or the people who aren't meant to know these things wouldn't want to talk about. But they had, an experience where their father passed away from cancer when they were young. And it took some time for them to open up to me and tell me that they openly communicate with him. And the next experience I had was the same gentleman who was my client initially, who, was very spiritually gifted. I went into a session with him, and I was able to talk to my grandpa who passed away, and I was also able to talk to my sister who recently passed away. I had another girl who was spiritual. She was able to, the day my sister died, I told her, and she was able to talk to her. And she was actually with my friend's brothers who also passed away. She had 2 brothers who passed away. She had a handicap disease, and so did my friend's sister. She also had brothers with a disease. And I'll talk about, why we can communicate with the dead, or how communicating with the dead can be beneficial, or what their reasoning is. As a preface, when it comes to spirituality, I don't think everything's for everybody. Why are some people gifted? Why are there mediums out there? Why can some people do it? Why can Ronaldo be such an amazing ball player? Yeah, he puts in a lot of hard work, but that's just something ingrained in him. Why can some people pick up a trumpet and then they're exceptionally skilled at, playing instruments? Why I did wrestling and kickboxing, and I was really talented at it, a lot better than people who had a lot more experience than me, but that was just something I was good at, right? And it could be because my past life I was a soldier, but that's another story. But ultimately, some people have talents, and some people can work towards gaining those talents, and some people will never have those talents. And not everything should be explicitly stated in the Quran. This is how you do X, Y, Z, because guess what? The Quran is accessible to anybody. So is the Bible, so is the Torah. What do you think people are going to do if they learn the ability to talk to the dead? If they learn the ability to astral project, or if everybody could astral project, what do you think they'd be doing it for? The CIA, all the intelligence agencies, they actively look for psychics. They actively look for astral projectors. They're not doing it to talk to their spirit guides. Trust me, they're doing it to spy on people. So that's a little preface. But I'm going to start off when I was able to talk to my grandpa. So about my grandpa, he was a refugee from Palestine. He was also an orphan. And so he basically was raised by his uncles and other family members. He didn't have a lot of money. It created a big insecurity, not having that, not having a father or a mother and then being in another country. And he just had to work really hard. And now that I understand psychology, and that's what I majored in, I mean, he suffered from PTSD. And that's what my client, who I went into the session for, who was able to help me connect with my grandpa, explained it as he suffered from a trauma, And by him talking to me, what he basically told me was that he wanted me to break the trauma. Now, I didn't even believe in the term generational trauma. But ultimately, if you look at cultures, you look at society, even look at the animal kingdom, you look at anything. If your grandparents suffered from a trauma, that trauma is now brought down to you as a child. And then, sorry, let me say it like this. If your parents suffered from a trauma, that child's going to suffer from a trauma. And then that child's child is going to suffer from a trauma. So that's how generational trauma gets created, gets existed. And that mentality is going to be passed down. So I didn't even believe in generational trauma until really this moment. But there was a lot of things that made me understand that he did have anxiety. I know one thing he has is he used to grind his teeth a lot. I actually grind my teeth. Just an overall general nervousness. I know when people describe, people, you kind of, when you're in your family, you don't notice if something's odd or if something's off. Because everyone in your family is the same way. When you start to associate with other people, you get married to someone from a faraway family, then that's when they start to say, oh, well, this family's like this family's like this, you guys are like this, you guys are like this. Some of it's genetics, a lot of it's environment, a lot of it's in nature shapes genetics. That's, if you want to look more into that, look up epigenetics. We know that nature affects genetics, but a lot of things is nature based. What determines culture? Culture is determined over generations, it's determined over wars, it's determined over slavery, it's determined over oppression, it's determined over being on the opposite side of being oppressor. So it's the same concept when you break it down. If my grandpa, for example, suffered a trauma, I'm going to still carry that trauma, and so is the people in my family. So when he spoke to me, what he told me was that I needed to open up my family and try to explain this to them and tell them about generational trauma. I worked as a personal trainer in a real estate agent. I get it all the time. My parents and a lot of my family members saying that's not a real job. You need to do medicine. You need to do this. I know my dad, he has a lot of nervousness. He can't really relax. He's always focused on money, and this and this. Because ultimately, my grandpa was in survival mode. When you're in survival mode, you don't have time to develop the other aspects of your personality. You don't have time to focus on emotions. You don't have time to focus on creativity. You don't have time to figure out what it is you really want to do, that you're meant to do, right? And so when he spoke to me, and he said, he follows me actually as one of my guys, but that's a different story that I'll get into. But he wanted me to essentially try to break this trauma. And I mean, just like when I make this video, I mean, Muslims are some of the hardest people to get through when it comes to anything. Even though half the people who say this is fake, this isn't true, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ couldn't do this, which is bullshit. I mean, he could literally bring people back to life and cure their blindness. I mean, it's not hard for him to communicate with the dead. I mean, he went to the 7th level of heaven. It's not hard for him to transverse. He could speak to the jinn. I mean, he could see the jinn. He could speak to the jinn. Those are beings in another dimension. So it's not that hard to believe that these prophets or these saints have certain abilities. But now, anyways, that's really where the meaning for me was. It was that it was something that was meant to happen. He specifically follows me because I'm really the only one in my family who's into spirituality. Probably one of the only people in my community overall that's really into this. But no, I did tell my family. I didn't say I talked to him when he was dead. I mean, that's too much for a lot of people. But I just said, I mean, he suffered from a generational trauma, and you know, be easier on your kids. Stop worrying about them all being accountants, or them all being doctors, or them all being this, or them all being that. You know, just allow them to figure out about themselves. Where, you know, develop emotional, you know, develop like fixating on your emotions, develop. And this is something that, you know, the Arab communities, because a lot of us are refugee communities, that we suffer from. We're always in survival mode versus being in, you know, it's homeopathic view of, let's find out who you are, let's find out what you like, let's cure our traumas, let's talk about things. I mean, we struggle with that. And specifically, I mean, if your grandpa was an orphan refugee, imagine the trauma that gets carried on and passed on. So that was the whole point of me communicating with my grandpa, with the dad, with your ancestors. It's to try to heal traumas that are within your families. Just try to break curses. Now, I was also able to communicate with my sister, and it wasn't anything deep. I mean, it was more the same way you talk to your sister if she was still alive. You know, obviously, I love you, I always protect you, I'm praying for you. I mean, basically what she told me is that when she was alive, she was always praying for me, because I like to do crazy intense things sometimes, and then she's like, now that I'm dead, I'm still praying for you even more. You know, I think for everybody, the main reason they want to communicate with the dead is they want to connect with their family. You know, I think a lot of people maybe want to get some sort of knowledge from them. You're going to get the people who want to communicate with the dead that they don't even know, that maybe aren't that great, to try to do the negative aspects. And that's the thing with spirituality. Just like there's a positive to it, there's always a negative to it. And that's why I don't think this stuff is supposed to be explicitly out there. But it's very possible to talk to the dead. And we know that they're in purgatory. In Islam, we call it barzakh. You know, we know that when we sleep, Allah, He specifically says in the Quran, so this isn't hadith, this isn't me making this up or saying my personal experience. In the Quran, it says that Allah takes, you know, our souls with Him every time we go to sleep, and that's one of the signs. At least He states that. We know there's different dimensions. We know there's jinns. We know there's angels. You know, the barzakh could be its own dimension. You know, so ultimately, yes, it's very possible to speak to the dead. And you know, is there fake mediums out there? Absolutely. Is there fake doctors, dentists, lawyers, police? There's fake everything. You know, we don't really have a licenseship for, oh, are you a medium? Okay, you proved it to me, here you go. You know, ultimately, people who actually have these abilities probably aren't going to want to be famous. But, you know, I do believe, I've watched some of the famous people. I know that guy from New Jersey who is a medium. I think he's legit. I mean, he'll just go up to people, you know, have a crowd, and then he'll say, like, your family member said this, or they say this to you, and the crowd starts, like, tearing up. And, you know, you just got to open up your mind. The best thing is, before you ever say something's fake, or something's real, or something's haram, or something's this, just open up your mind to it. You know, that's the main thing. But again, I don't think it's meant for everybody. I think in my case, it was meant for me because I needed to break a trauma that was in my family, that was in my lineage. And I don't want that to carry on to my kids, for example. But yeah, I think that's, you know, how does this apply to you? I think, you know, if you can't do it yourself, find a skilled medium. It's not that hard to Google search. It's not that hard to find reviews for somebody. And ultimately, you know, go in for the right reasons. You know, go in thinking, you know, is there any traumas that you want me to break? Is there anything that you weren't able to accomplish that you want me to accomplish? I know when I was listening to a video from a sheikh, I think it was Sheikh Suleiman, he was talking about how there was an instance of this man he knew. His father died while he was in Hajj, and all of his sons had the same dream, or all of his kids. I don't think it was just sons. They all had the same dream. In his dream, their father came and said, can you go on my behalf and forgive this gentleman that I wronged? So they did go to this man that they all had in the same dream. They went to him, you know, they hugged him, whatever, and they said, for my father, would you, you know, forgive us in the name of my father? And then the next day they had a dream that he was in heaven. So there's things that, you know, that maybe your parents did wrong that they want to teach you that your grandparents did wrong that they want to teach you. I mean, in my case, it was what my grandpa did wrong and how he raised his children, and he just made them work at such a young age. He wasn't like, so how was your day at school today? It was like, so, get ready for your day at work, and then my dad's the same damn way. I don't want to be like that, but that's the thing, if your parents, for example, didn't have too good of a relationship, you got to understand that you're going to struggle to not have too good of a relationship. Why did Chris Brown beat Rihanna? Why did he have issues with relationships? Well, when he was growing up, his mom had boyfriends, and their boyfriends used to beat the mom, and he witnessed that, and that was a trauma he never cured from. People who are sex trafficked when they're children, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, even though it's the worst thing that something had happened to people, those people tend to also do that to their children. People tend to repeat traumas unless they heal from those traumas. And also, people tend to think something's normal if it's within their family. If everyone in their family is a certain way, they tend to think that's normal. So, just as much as it's a video talking about, yeah, I've had experience where I communicated with the dead personally. I didn't go to anybody to do that. I know 2 people who have those abilities. I know other people, I mean, my own family members who communicate with their father who passed away, my uncle who passed away. It's there, it's a thing, but what can it do for you? I mean, they can give you advice, they can communicate with you. And Allah can communicate with us too. In the Quran, it specifically says, God can't communicate with humans unless it's through a term called ilham, or divine inspiration. Divine inspiration, it's the same thing as, you say, give me a sign and you see a rainbow, or you say, give me a sign and something happens. That's divine inspiration. That's God communicating with you through an angel. An angel can come to you. I mean, it can come in different forms. And the dead, your ancestors, they're going to be more able to communicate with you, right? Because there's hierarchies. Your ancestors aren't that. They're not like angels. They're not like God, obviously. They're not like the prophets, so they can more readily communicate with you. So, yeah, we all have something to learn from them. And that's something to keep in mind. Focus on healing your traumas. Just even without communicating with the dead, that's something that everyone suffers from. That's something that I was able to learn from my grandpa. I didn't even know generational trauma was a real thing or what it was. I didn't know I had it inside of me. I didn't know that was going to cause me to maybe be more prone to anxiety, or I see the nervousness in my dad. I see, certain things with the way my mom is, for example, or the way that her family is, right? I mean, you look to people and you say, it ultimately comes down to how you raise your children. That's how your whole lineage is going to be. Like, for lineages and lineages, that's how they're going to be like that. And especially within the Arab culture, we're old school. We say, well, my parents did this, so I should do it. We like to live in tradition. People who suffered a trauma, sometimes they could have the worst things happen to them. They could have been raped as a child, and then guess what they grow up to be? They grow up to be a pedophile themselves, right? I look at Palestine, I look at my own country. We see people who are 15 years old who commit acts of violence. I'm not getting political here, but I mean, our people have been in wars before Israel conquered. There was Britain, there was the Ottomans. I mean, we have this super long lineage of like violence, and it almost became a part of our culture, and this desensitization. Right? And at the same time, when you look at the Israelis, they have a generational trauma. 6 million of them were murdered in a concentration camp, right? And that also stayed with them, right? So that's going to also make them violent. That's going to make both peoples violent, right? And when you talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you could say it's a generational trauma. When you look at the black population in America, why do they struggle so much? I mean, when you're put through slavery and in terrible conditions, that's going to leave a trauma. And I hear a lot of, some, like J. Cole, he talks about generational trauma. He talks about the black community needing to heal. So ultimately, it can be something big scale, like the Israelis and the Palestinians. It can be the black Americans. When you look at, why are so many, let's say your father wasn't present, or your father cheated, or your father and mother didn't have a good relationship, you're also going to struggle to be like that. You know, when you look at the Black American population, they struggle to have father figures or strong family units. But they grow up without a father, and what do? Instead of, you know, they're not able to heal from their trauma, so they repeat the same trauma. So this can just be just as much talking about healing from your trauma, just as much as communicating with the dead, because ultimately the dead, when people die, that's when they become wise, right? You can live till 80, 90 years old, you're not even fully wise, but when you're dead, that's when you figure it out. And at that point, you can't transmute that to your family. But then there are people who can be able to get there and transmute it to your family. And ultimately, if you're watching this video, you're probably meant to do that, because my videos aren't for everybody, right? If I have a good body, if I started posting YouTube videos about talking how to get abs, I'll get millions of views. You know, if I start posting videos saying what is the best sign for a Libra to hook up with, or whatever, what's Libra and Aries is the best matches, you know, I'm going to get a bunch of views. I talk about communicating with dead, I talk about Islam, religion, I'm not going to get that many views. So ultimately, the people who are watching this, you're probably meant to do this type of stuff. So thank you for watching.